My name is Colin Pillay. I'm a clinical pharmacologist. I'm talking to you today from Basel in Switzerland, and I'm an advisor to the African Academy of Sciences on this fantastic project, the Clinical Trials Community Platform that we'll tell you about. So in today's meeting, what we're going to do is to go through a few very short talks. This will be interspersed with audience participation surveys. The questions in the survey are intended to collect some information from you, but also to prompt you to write some questions into the chat feature. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, for those of you that may not be familiar with the Zoom platform, you will see a chat feature. And in there, we would encourage you to type in your questions. So you are muted, so please use the chat feature. And for the most part, your videos should be also shut down. And this is in order for us to be able to save bandwidth. We have a team in the background supporting us. From time to time, they might come in, but they're also monitoring the chat line and will then summarize those questions in order to feed it to us for the question and answer session. We will not be taking questions after each talk, but we reserve a time closer towards the middle of the webinar in order to do a facilitated Q&A session. For today's webinar, we're trying out something new, and there will be simultaneous translation into French. Paxton, are you projecting the slides right now so that people can see how they should be able to join on that?
Yes, it's being projected. Okay,
excellent. So, so we really look forward to a team in the background that's busy doing simultaneous translation from English into French. Let's see, what else? The last thing that I want to tell you is that this meeting is recorded. By you staying in the meeting, you are giving consent to being recorded. You would have also seen this in some of the preliminary information that we sent out to you. So the aims of today's webinar is to provide an opportunity for regulators and clinical trials ethics committees to see and influence the design of features on the online platform that could facilitate their work. We'd also like to provide an opportunity for trialists to hear and contribute to sponsors and CRO selection criteria with a particular focus on regulatory and ethics evaluations. And then for trialists that have joined the meeting to ask regulatory and ethics related questions. And then finally, when Adrian comes in closer towards the end to do a demo, we will show you how to register on the platform if you haven't already done that. The platform is live, and you can even consider diving into the platform right now and starting to register yourself. To get us started, let me invite Tom Kariuki to give us to set the tone and to set the background. Tom is the Director of Programs at the African Academy of Sciences. And Tom, upfront, big thanks for your leadership in getting this particular project up and running. Tom?
Thanks, Colin. Welcome to all of you from wherever you are based. I'm delighted to be joining this afternoon or mornings, wherever you are based in. So I know you are a large group interested in clinical research and clinical trials, science and innovation in Africa. So we are delighted to, whenever we have an opportunity to get together. So I think I just want to make a few points with regards to where we are and where we are coming from. In terms of the status of Africa with regards to clinical trials in Africa, I think many of you will be familiar with the facts. I mean, only about 2% of trials come to Africa. Only about 3 countries in Africa make up that 70% of the trials that come to Africa. And therefore, there is a need, of course, for many, many more countries to become engaged as we move forward. Now, there is what I find from the African Academy of Sciences, working with many, many teams across the continent. There is limited contribution with regard to the early phase or preclinical trials There is a lot more in terms of phase 1, 2, and 3, but very little in terms of discovery work. But I think our capacities and our capabilities are really geared towards building across the entire continuum of discovery, development, clinical trials, even starting to thinking, for example, through Africa CDC around manufacturing and access to vaccines and drugs and deployment in Africa. Now, I think in economic terms, there are also, as we know, there are billions of dollars that are going to broad products R&D, but a bigger portion of this budget is not coming to Africa. And if that was to happen, then of course this would translate into a lot more foreign investments and economic benefits for communities. But this would only happen, of course, if there is a better ease of doing business in Africa and a good conducive environment for the funders and the sponsors and investors who want to do this in Africa. Now, in terms of the history that we have, it's been 3 years in making for these community trials, the clinical community trials platform. It's been 3 years of us getting us here. There have been lots of discussions with various capitals, with various leaders and organizations. Started in Japan with discussions with global leaders. We went to the World Economic Forum. We have engagement with funders. We have engagement with African stakeholders. We have many, many more meetings and webinars, including with people I see on board today, like AVAREF and WHO, funders, the Gates Foundation. We have a lot of discussions that have helped us to get us where we are today. The vision for this platform is to develop a one-stop shop that supports researchers, their institutions, their research and their centers and clinical trial sites. And you'll hear from a very able team that has been leading this initiative on our status and our preparedness to launch this platform later this year. I think that you will be able to see what we will be showcasing today, what we call the MVP product, based on the authentic data and intelligence that has been gathered by this team, whether it is data on leaders or clinicians or data managers or the governance. Nobody wants to put money into any site or center or institution that cannot manage their grants. Data on experience is very, very important. But I think particularly important is the state of our regulatory and our ethics approvals, which is what we really want to hear more from you. Now, if I was a sponsor who sits in a capital somewhere in the world, and I'm thinking about a clinical trial that could come to Africa, if I then was to log into this clinical trials community platform, I would want to know how long it would take for me to get regulatory and ethics approval. Would it take me 6 months to take those approvals, to get those approvals, or would it take me 6 days? Because it is about time, it's about value, it's about money. So the speed with which we move forward is what is going to make it attractive as a continent that can actually then host many more trials. So we hope you will be engaged. We hope you'll make your contributions through what I think you hope you'll see as a beautiful product that has been built by our team. And we hope that after this meeting, you will also take the time to visit this platform and get yourself, your research team, your institution, your policy department, get more involved, and we'll be joining this community. I think that if we agree as a community that we can address the challenges that face us, whether it is the regulatory and ethics approvals, whether there is competition. Yes, there is competition. All the thousands and thousands upon thousands of clinical trials that are happening, we are in competition to get those to come to Africa. And we need to think about that level, the technologies required, how we collect data, and how we then take care of the site and the people. But if we do all of that, I am very optimistic that the future could look very good for clinical trials in Africa. And so I look forward to our discussion this afternoon. Thank you, and back to you to Colin.
So thanks very much, Tom. Colleagues, you would have received the agenda, and towards the end of the agenda is the biographies of this group of people that are going to address you today. Each one of them is going to talk for about 5 minutes or so. So that's the plan. The idea is that we're hoping that we'd have as much time as possible for questions. My expectation is that we might run a little bit over. So apologies in advance if we don't have enough time for questions. So the first two speakers are David Mukanga and Giadi. In that order. David is with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The reason I mention them together is that they've been with us on this journey from the very beginning, and in particular on this topic of regulation within the continent. We've constantly had feedback that this is indeed one of the biggest impediments to move forward. And let's hear now from these two colleagues, starting with David. So David Mukanga is with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, based in Kampala, so really at the heart of where everything happens. And his specific role is around strengthening regulatory systems on the continent. David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar. And I want to start by thanking the Africa Academy of Sciences for asking me to make a few remarks and share my thoughts at this very important webinar. The clinical trials community platform that the Africa Academy of Sciences is developing, as you'll get to see later on, I think has tremendous potential to be transformative in terms of creating an enabling environment for clinical trials for different communities and stakeholders that may be that are interested in this clinical trials enterprise. Tom has set a very good context in terms of, you know, why we need to create an enabling environment for clinical trials on the continent, and so that sets a very good stage to some of the things I'm going to comment on as relates to the platform, but also the work that we're doing to optimize the regulatory and ethics ecosystems on the African continent. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for which I work for, has invested in this clinical trial community platform, and this really was driven by a lack, to a large extent, on the lack of information on the clinical trial ecosystem, you know, from the perspective of the multiple disease and therapeutic areas that we fund. There's just been generally a lack of access to information about sites, about, you know, what are the regulatory and ethics requirements that Tom alluded to earlier on, you know, the predictability of those, how long is it going to take for me to get a decision, you know, is it 3 months, is it 6 months, is it 2 years, and so on. It's not very helpful if one application takes 2 months. Now, granted, you know, the applicant has to submit an application that meets the requirements, of course, before a review can be done. But, you know, those predictabilities are really, really important in making the region attractive. So those investments were largely to address that, but also to reduce the duplication in terms of the landscapes that, you know, trial sponsors are always getting into to try and understand which may be a good site to do a study, what are the capabilities, and so forth. So the hope is that those repetitive landscapes will be diminished, and that people can rely, sponsors and industry can rely on the platform to understand, you know, the best places to go and do studies, who to partner with, and so on. We also expect that the platform will contribute to enhancing transparency with regard to requirements for ethics and regulatory submissions, as well as the review processes themselves. My role at the foundation has primarily focused on facilitating and building a predictable, transparent, efficient regulatory system on the continent. And since 2012, the Gates Foundation has invested in these systems across the product life cycle, working with technical, operational, and funding partners across the continent. Strong regulatory systems are key to managing risks. They promote stability and transparency and provide guidance to companies and all actors on how to behave. I would say that any house without laws and regulations is not a home, it's a motel. and anything goes. So these systems are critical in protecting our populations from unintentional and intentional harm, abuse and exploitation on the one hand, but at the same time also ensuring that we are not stifling innovation that is really, really needed for developing tools to advance the work that we all do in global health, to fight disease, for disease control, diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccines, etc., as we see with COVID right now, that is the topical subject. So regulation is a global enterprise, I would say, and no single country or nation has the resources and expertise it needs to protect its population and deliver the innovation it needs in isolation. Whether that's the US or Europe or Japan, no single nation has the resources and expertise. So people have to come together, countries have to come together to collaborate. Therefore, partnerships between and across countries and with partners are central to the enterprise of regulation and conducting clinical trials. Not every country also on their own is able to develop the standards and the systems required to oversee clinical trials during an emergency, as well as for routine trials. And we don't know where the next large outbreak will happen, as we saw with Ebola in West Africa, or other emerging and re-emerging infections. So you need some minimal capacity within a country, and then layer on that partnerships with others to reinforce that and really make sure that regardless of where the burden is, that when you need to develop products, you can leverage that infrastructure to effectively do trials in an efficient, predictable manner that doesn't stifle innovation but protects the population as well. So some minimal national capacity really is required, as well as partnership with others. The WHO's normative role in developing standards is critical here as well, as a regional and continental partners that we have developed, partnership that we have developed working with groups like AVAREF that you'll hear from shortly, and the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative. Equally, strong countries are at risk if they do not collaborate with the weaker neighbors, and even those that may be afar off. Last year, IATA reports that there were 4.2 billion travelers globally on flights. That just tells you the scale of risk with emerging and re-emerging infections. And so if you don't build an infrastructure that allows people to collaborate and build the kind of assets that would allow a quick and expedited process of coming in, identifying places to do research and to go through the regulatory and ethics reviews, it becomes very difficult. And that's where the CTC platform, I think, will be very, very helpful. So the foundation has invested in AVAREF and the CTC platform really to enhance harmonization of technical standards and processes for clinical trials across Africa, as well as enhance the regulatory preparedness for research and development in emergencies, but also for routine clinical trials. You'll hear more about the AVAREF platform, but they have developed an expedited joint review process that will, puts forward a timeline of 10 to 15 days, working days for repurposed and novel products respectively. And I think it will be of great interest for researchers and developers to learn a little bit more about this and to use this platform. So I look forward to the conversations, and I think your feedback and your insights into how best the AIS can set up this platform will be invaluable in enabling the AIS develop a fit-for-purpose platform that will serve all of us. So thank you all very much.
David, thank you very much. Very crisp, very clear messages. And to quote a mutual friend, thank you for everything that you do on the continent. So you've provided a nice basis to move into the next speaker. In the meantime, I notice that people are introducing themselves on the chat feature. Please, we encourage you to continue to do that. Also, if David has sparked some question in your mind, please type it into the chat room, and some of our colleagues will monitor that, and we'll find an opportunity to be able to put that up for discussion. So let me now introduce Jyadi. As I mentioned before, the full CVs are on the invitation, but Jyadi comes with a couple of decades of experience in development, implementation, and evaluation of regulatory strategies for both pharmaceuticals as well as for policies in this regard. Giadi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Hi, everyone. So I want to thank again the African Academy of Sciences for firstly for the collaboration with WHO, the Regional Office for Africa, as well as the AVAREF Secretary of the African Vaccine Regulatory Forum Secretariat. So I want to thank you also for inviting me to this very important webinar. And I think that we couldn't imagine at this circumstance of the COVID-19 a more appropriate occasion to reflect on a topic of very high priority for the moment, which is the clinical trials. First of all, my role at WHO Regional Office for Africa, AFRO, is to support the African region member states with vaccine regulation, including the running of the Secretariat of the African Vaccine Regulatory Forum, AVAREF. So AVAREF is a network of national medicines regulatory authorities and ethics committees for the 55 African countries. So it's a platform, a network which has been created in 2006 to strengthen the capacity of these two institutions, the National Medicine Regulatory Authorities and Ethics Committees, both national ethics committees and institutional review boards or institutional ethics committees, local ethics committees. Then also to strengthen or to establish harmonization to achieve convergence, because we need convergence of regulatory approval procedures or regulatory practices or ethical review practices in the African region. So since 2006, I can say that a lot of achievements have been made. For example, we can see that this platform developed a lot of harmonized guidance document to address clinical trial matters in terms of regulation and ethics, and also competitive review targets, and a platform for the joint review of clinical trial applications. So which is very well in line with the topic we are discussing today. So a key focus for AVAREF is to harmonize the regulatory processes across Africa. So this work started with vaccines in 2006, but in 2016, it has been extended to cover all medical products, particularly medicines. And now we can see that it has gained more visibility with the COVID-19. I'm sure that many of you attending this webinar today also attended many webinars AVAREF is organizing currently since May 2020, starting by a weekly webinar and now every 2 weeks. In addition to even additional webinars we are organizing for very specific targets in the African continent. So harmonization and collaboration across agencies, across African countries become especially important for multi-site clinical trials and those involving Pan-African patient recruitment. So for me personally, one key item that has worked well for AVAREF is collaboration between NRAs, National Regulatory Authorities, and ethics committees, and harmonization of requirement and practices for review of clinical trial applications, including joint reviews. So talking about joint reviews, I can say that in contrast to reviews being undertaken by individual countries, joint reviews consisted of a joint evaluation, which is undertaken which is done on an application submitted to multiple countries in the African region. It can be two or more than two countries, involving both the regulatory authorities and ethics committees. And then the first advantage of the AVAREF joint review was awareness and better understanding of the complexity of review process, which is something which is complex, particularly for vaccines. And also leverage collective experience and knowledge on the methodological, scientific, and ethical considerations. And also for the sponsors, some of them are attending this webinar today, I'm sure. The benefit is that the whole process follows a predetermined timeline, which has been highlighted by my colleague David Mukanga from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation when he talked about predictability, which is very key, very important. And also, as he indicated, to reduce duplication in the review process. So this is made possible through the joint review process, and also it permits, with the support of WHO as facilitator, to avoid undue delays in the review process itself. However, we find that often clinical trial sponsors, principal investigator, trialists are unaware of what is available and how to work with the different agencies across the continent. So I think this is one of the key areas where the African Academy of Sciences Clinical Trials Community Platform promises to be of help. And then since early on this process, I think it was in 2019, early 2019 or end of 2018, we at WHO AVAREF Secretariat, we have worked closely, very closely with the African Academy of Sciences, the CTC team, in order to use the platform to showcase the processes required to gain approval for trials in the different countries across the continent. So this has been really mutually beneficial. Together we developed a checklist of country-level regulatory and IRB or institutional ethics committee information with a view to increase awareness and harmonization among regional member states. And this tool, this checklist has been pilot tested by AVAREF in many countries, including Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Cameroon, yes, Gabon, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Kenya, and Uganda. And I think for a pilot test, so this is a quite good number of countries, very representative of different regional economic communities. You can see that we have ECOWAS represented by Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Ghana. You have Central African region, Cameroon, Gabon. You have the SADC region, you have Zimbabwe there. You have Malawi. And you have also the East African community represented by Uganda, by Kenya. And you can also see that we have even more mature regulatory authorities against WHO global benchmarking tool assessment. We have Ghana, which is now against WHO global benchmarking tool maturity level 3. And you also have you have some countries here, I'm not going to mention their name, who are very close to maturity level 3. You have at least one country in this case. And then what I can add to that is, respectively, in July and in October 2019, the AVAREF steering committee, so you know AVAREF, we have many statutory bodies, at 3 statutory bodies, the technical coordinating committee, which is the technical arm, but you have a steering committee, and you have the assembly, which is the highest decision-making body of the platform. So these two entities, the steering committee and the assembly, So again, the assembly, to be specific, is composed by all head of agencies, all head of regulatory authorities, and chairperson of the ethics committees, or the representative. So this assembly was updated in October 2019 in Victoria Falls on the development of a CTC platform dedicated to monitor changes in the regulatory environment of clinical trial applications, review, and oversight. So I think this is a very big step, which is important to highlight, having all the African countries in a meeting, being updated and given a positive feedback on this work moving forward. So I think, as indicated by David Mukanga, again, I want to stress on that. So the routine review of clinical trials within the international targets and an optimized joint review process for priority public health products that allows for advanced planning with product developers is very key. And it is in this context also that we, in May 2020, we developed an AVAREF emergency joint review process, which allows to make the review and make the decision, national decision, within 10 days for product which are going to be repurposed to COVID-19, but 15 days for new product which are not licensed. So to try to conclude my talk, I can say that we are early in this journey, but the regulatory and clinical trial community should expect the CTC platform to improve engagement across the entire community of clinical trialists, sponsors, regulators, to ultimately help regulators to do their job of ensuring safe and effective medicines and vaccines for our population. Thank you very much. I will stop here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Jerry, thank you so much. Really, you were spot on in terms of giving us that overview. I'm sure that the colleagues on the call, some of this might be news to them, so I'm looking forward to questions from the team, from the participants. So those of you that have joined late, the good news is that we have the opportunity for you to join either in English, the language that we're projecting in, or to have simultaneous translation. So let's hope that that is working well in the background. So just a little reminder that you could have clicked a button in order to be able to see that. Our next speaker was going to have been Mimi Daku, who is both chair of AVAREF that Jadi told you about, as well as the head of the Ghana FDA. But as you know, we live in unusual times, and I just got an email coming in from Mimi indicating that she's been called away to an emergency meeting. So that's the bad news, that we won't hear from her. The good news is that we probably get a few more minutes to be able to have Q&A. At this point, I want to switch tacks a little bit and do the first of the surveys that we had planned. Originally, this was going to be done by Faith, who is part of the team. It would have been really cool if Faith could have done this, but she's been having some technical difficulties, and we're going to have Davies lead us through what we need to do in order to go through those two questions. Davies, are you ready?
Thank you so much, Colin. So I'll give the participants 30 seconds.
So Davies, if you're talking, you've gone mute now.
Okay, sorry for that. So if the participants can look at the chart, I've sent a link to the site menti.com. The access code is 8509029. So you have 30 seconds to log in, after which I will start off the first question. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. So for the first question, what type of participant are you? First answer, a researcher or a scientist. B is clinical trialist / clinical trial staff. C is regulator. D, ethics committee / institutional review board member. E, clinical trial sponsor. F, clinical research organization member, CROs. G, product development partner, PDPs. And for other, you can specify on the chat box. So you have 1 minute to answer this question. And we can actively see that a lot of answers are coming in.
So Davies, there was one question as to whether multiple choices are possible.
I believe they are.
For multiple choices, they can specify in chart, other, and then specify in chart.
Okay, thanks, Wycliffe. So I'll just repeat again, for multiple choices, please specify on the chat box. We have 30 more seconds. Ten seconds. 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I would ask us to move to question number 2. Which country are you from? I would like us to write the full names of our countries. So if it's DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. You have 1 minute for this question as well. Okay, I'll take that down to 30 seconds as it's a quick fire. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For our third question, what are your expectations for this webinar? So you can just type in. You have 1 minute for this. 30 seconds. Ten seconds. 5 seconds. I believe we should have finished answering that question. Thank you so much. Back over to you, Colin.
So thanks, Davies. At some stage, we will show you those results. Alternatively, we might send it to you after the meeting. I would also like to, I noticed that some of you have been typing your answers into the chat feature, which is perfectly okay. But ideally, we would like you to answer on the Mentimeter link. And Davies, if you could just pop into the chat feature the link and the code to get into the Mentimeter. We are particularly interested, we're interested in your answers to all the questions, of course, but we're especially interested in your answers to the next few questions. So we will change tack a little bit now with the next two speakers. One is from a contract research organization, and the other is from a pharmaceutical company. Our first speaker, Georges Belay from FHI Clinical. George is Vice President of Global Strategy for FHI Clinical. He manages collaborative relationships with sponsors and sites, or sponsors of clinical trials and the clinical trial sites. So he is really ideally placed to be able to give you some perspectives as to what the situation is on the continent as he liaises outside of the continent on your behalf. George, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Colin, and hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to this meeting. And for the organizers, really thank you for inviting me to this meeting. So, I mean, so this is interesting. I had pre-written a lot of what I wanted to say, but as Professor Kariuki and Dr. Mukanga started speaking, I made complete different notes. So because it was quite interesting, and maybe you know, I would continue on that tack. So for those of you who are not familiar with the role of a CRO, it is really we're the ones, we're an organization that is hired and works closely with the sponsors in the implementation phase of the study. You know, and of interest to this meeting, my main role in my organization is really to look at feasibility. So when there are projects, you know, I do work with sponsors and with the sites to find the right sites, the right countries, and then implementation planning to see, you know, what are we looking at for timelines, what are the regulatory requirements, and a lot of other things. And I have been working in this role specifically focused in Africa since 2004. And the one thing that is gratifying is that when we first started working on this, my organization has been doing this for a while, but you know, there were very few, and now really I know there's still not enough clinical trials, but you know, the number of clinical trials that used to be done when I first started coming to do clinical trials in Africa, and now is really great to see that you know, we are doing quite a bit more than we were doing before. So you know, just as a segue, you know, Professor Kariuki said, you know, it is important to understand the approval timelines. And I think from a CRO perspective, and then understanding the regulatory aspects, and the main gap that we see is that, you know, we do see that we do understand certain countries' timelines and the regulatory requirements, but it is not clear as far as continent-wide. It's not really about transparency, but the availability of the information and how well those processes have been thought of in different countries, because it is true that shorter timelines would help. But I think one of the main gaps we see is that we don't, for most places, we don't even understand what the actual process is, what the requirements are. We have to go and look for this information, but it is not readily available to even, and I think those are missed opportunities, because for those of us who have ideas about where to go, even if the information is not available, we know who to ask. But if that information is really available and for everybody to see as well as understand, I think that is one of the gaps that we see as we work within the clinical trial process in Africa. So it is interesting, and Professor Kariuki rightfully said that most of the trials go to very few countries in Africa. And there is a reason for that, and it's not even because of timelines, because they're fast and so on. But I think most people do understand the regulations, as well as you can time it appropriately and actually be able to do things on the times that you have predicted. If you say it's going to take me 3 months for ethics committee approval and the whole process, and then the regulators would be X amount of time. And then getting all the permits, the necessary permits, and the logistical aspects of it done in a year. A year might be too long, but I do, from a sponsor's perspective, the timelines are clear, so we can plan towards that. And I think that is one of the most important things, is that yes, fast is very much appreciated, but actually sticking to the timelines and understanding what the regulations are and being able to meet those requirements, get those reviews done, and getting it started in the predicted time is actually, I would say, quite important I think from a CRO perspective, and I'm pretty sure from a sponsor perspective as well, because at least that gives you a clear timeline. Because what has to happen from a CRO and sponsor's perspective is there's a lot of planning that goes behind all of this. It's not just the approvals, but the planning of all the logistical aspects. If you're doing a vaccine trial, for example, assuring that you do the procurement for your control vaccines, making sure and understanding getting the same batch of vaccines, the right, at the right time. To get it in country and so on. So these delays of not having the right permits and so on, it does create a lot of problems on the back end, where the sponsor, the CROs, and their different vendors are planning towards getting all the necessary materials ready as the approval process is going on. So uncertainty or delays in those timelines really does create a backlog of activities that need to be done. And as a lot of you are aware, procurement for clinical supplies, for control vaccines and so on, it's not something that we just go to a wholesaler and put an order in. There is a lot of process, because we try to get the same batch of drugs and get it from the right place, making sure that, standard of care products that we are procuring are the same for the countries that they're going to go into. So I think, what my hope is that, in this forum, we can think about that and say, there is, the regulatory aspect and the ethics committee aspect are critical, because basically everything starts with them, but we are planning all of the rest of the activities around these specific timelines that are provided. And so, it does make sense, I think, that we are doing a lot of work in certain countries, because we do get to a comfort level, because we do understand how the process is in these countries, and we can actually, predict what's going to happen, and it helps us on the planning end of the process. So, how can government centers and sites help? I think there is a lot of it is, for me personally, it is very positive. Where we started in 2004 versus where we are now is night and day. And I think, and platforms such as CTC, with the input of all the different actors in clinical trials in Africa, posting the right information and the right contacts, I think would be a great help for everybody, for the sponsors, for the CROs. It allows us for proper planning. But, and in addition to that, I think, it also helps in bringing the non-traditional, we do get a lot of work from different types of domain sponsors, governments, and so on, but it helps us even attract more trials into Africa to come through. And really, and the other thing that I would really like for this forum to consider is also, once we get these approvals, the rest of the bureaucracy, in a way, of government also has to follow. This means getting the right paperwork for customs clearances and administrative approvals as well, so that we actually have a good understanding from point A to point B, from a logistical perspective, from a planning perspective. We have a good visibility on the implementation timeline. And I mean, so in conclusion, I mean, a centralized platform like the CTC would be really grateful. And it would really make the process easily accessible, because we are often asked by the different collaborators about, comparison and regulatory intelligence, and to be able to provide it continent-wide would really be, would open up the clinical trial space for different countries, and even scientists, emerging scientists in the different countries, as well as, give us more opportunities to bring clinical trials and expand the field in the continent. And, having initial site feasibility information as well would be helpful. But ultimately, I think, and we've seen it with breakthrough trials in Ebola, in DRC recently, or Menafrivac. There are many examples of how patients in Africa will ultimately benefit from clinical trials being conducted in Africa. So I think I do appreciate the CTC, and I hope that we can make it better as we go. So I thank you, Colin. Over to you.
Thanks, George, and thanks for that positive message that there are indeed lots of interest on trials on the continent. Let's switch over to Bisola. Bisola is a regulatory scientist and a good friend, and been involved in both Africa as well as on the global health sphere. So Bisola, over to you.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, it's nice to see you, and certainly seeing some familiar names and faces. So yes, I've been involved in doing trials in Africa for almost the last 5 years at Novartis, and currently I'm in global health at Novartis, and a number of our products also will be trials that we're looking to do in Africa. So I think as industry in general, beyond Novartis, the need to expand our footprint in Africa beyond maybe what was done in the past of only going there when you needed to, for instance, for malaria or neglected tropical disease, is moving to where we understand to have a robust clinical trial data that represents population worldwide. It's imperative to try to study your medication in as many places as possible. So I think as an organization, there's a very renewed effort in doing this, right? And it's been an ongoing activity where, we're happy to see some of the momentum. And what we've also seen is, of course, the areas that, this has been going on in other continents for a long time, where so much experience has been built, but in Africa is where we need to really focus on creating that platform and availability of information. One of the key hurdles has always been timeline. Understandably, there's the aspects around capability building, capacity, etc. also. But I think these are two areas that we need to continue to expand on. From a timeline perspective, right? The clarity is what is most important. Certainly some are longer than others, but I think if there's clarity around that, you can also plan around it and certainly get into a future where you can shorten some of those timelines. What I've seen in the last 4 years or so is there's an improvement in the regulatory timeline for some countries, and also just based on experience. However, when we talk about timeline, we really need to look at it not just from a regulatory perspective, but from the ethics perspective as well, because these two are highly interwoven, where in most countries, you cannot get the regulatory approval without the ethics. And it doesn't matter if you get one without the other, because you really can't start the trial until both are done. So a platform where I think as it pertains to site selection is, when you start looking at sites, first of all, before you get into the site selection, having a platform that can show us where there's a high disease burden will help drive feasibility selection. But the high disease burden, though, I have to say, is also coupled then with really what is the accuracy in terms of diagnosis of diseases and the diagnostic tools and the robustness around that. I think that's something else that we need to better understand, especially as we think of expansion of, we also need to move away from the notion of, because this is what I see, you've had one successful experience in one site, and that becomes the go-to site for everyone to do trials. And of course, then you certainly overburden that. So what we really need to do is focus on expansion, because there's so much room for growth and opportunity around that. But I also want to go back to the ethics when we talk about the site selection, really understanding, because this will vary across different sites. Is there room for a central ethics approval, centralized ethics approval, or opportunities around how often will the ethics meet to facilitate the regulatory meeting process as well to grant approval? These are areas where we've certainly seen continued delays where, conceptually, we think some trials can start, you can get approval within like 60 days or even less, but then there's a hold up in terms of how many ethics needs to get the approval before you can then get a regulatory approval. So clarity around that as we think of sites and we look at some of the sites will be helpful. And indeed, if, again, back to what I said earlier about timelines, if some sites take longer, this is something that can be built into the planning phase, where perhaps those are the sites you start with as early as possible. Because, ultimately, when we start doing more trials in these countries, and for me, it's beyond the initial approval, there's also the approval of the amendments. These are key, because when we start talking about multi-regional trials, which is where we want to go beyond just the neglected tropical disease, we're focusing on specific sites. A delay in one site really delays the overall program, and it will be beyond Africa, and we don't want this to be a hindrance for further trial development. So really, it's clarity around trials in different aspects beyond the initial approval, and the ethics process that can support that. And I think, this process, because what we then see happening, and would like to avoid, I cannot emphasize timeline enough, is, sometimes we finally get the approval, but it comes so much later, where other countries are in a different phase of recruitment. And by the time the sites in Africa are ready to start, we're almost 100% enrolled. So it's a missed opportunity where we've invested that time, the resources with investigators and the sites, but then we don't need the patients from the countries anymore. In terms of, we don't need it in terms of completing the study to meet the statistical requirements. So I think these are all things that we need to think of in terms of how can we enable successfully completing clinical trials in Africa, and what kind of platform then, will be able to enable this. And I believe this is where the discussion around the CTC platform perhaps would be able to provide some of this. I do think it's very critical that we work across industry, third parties, CROs, to have more transparency in information and experience sharing across industry, across sites, because this is really, we're still in the process of building capability. We see this even in other established countries where we're doing trials. We work across industry more and more as we talk about going big on data, etc. So we really need to look at how we can leverage sharing information in a more holistic manner to really enable us to really now reach the trajectory of doing clinical trials in a more efficient manner in Africa. Thank you.
Oh, Pistola, wow, wonderful, rapid fire, some amazing points that you've made there. Thank you so much. Multiple things resonated with me. The idea of exposing those quiet sites. You mentioned that you've gone once to a particular site and then you keep going back there. So let's hope that the platform can help in some way with that. Thanks a lot, Pistola.
Thank you.
We're going to go back to the Mentimeter software right now. And Davies, I'm going to ask you to help us save a little bit of time. In other words, to push this a little bit faster. You've got 2 more questions. These questions are going to address some of the topics that our speakers have spoken about. And then thereafter, we will go to the demo of the platform. Davies?
Thank you, Colin. If we could just project the questions. For those who have just joined, the site is www.menti.com. The code is 8509029. I've shared these on the chat. Fifteen seconds. Three seconds. 2, 1. So we can move to the next question, please. Question number 2. What are your top 3 items that could improve ethics committees, institutional review boards, as it applies to clinical trials in Africa? The first option, centralize access to information on the submission process. The second option, increase capacity and training for ethics committee members. The third option, access to information on timelines for the application review process. The fourth option, advice meetings. The fifth option, access to questions, answers on applications that were submitted to multiple committees. The sixth question, use of technology, automation on systems in the review process. And the final option is others. You can specify that in the chat. You have 30 seconds. Fifteen seconds. Five seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
So thanks very much, Davies. And let's go directly now to Adrian. Davies, I'm assuming that you're done, right, with the questions?
Yes, Colin.
Thanks a lot. Adrian? And hopefully you can save us some time, Adrian, as you go through.
Yes, that's perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So I'm quickly going to take you through the platform. Thank you for all of us still, thanks to all of you still staying on the call. So just quickly, so you should see my screen here. We did share the link earlier in the chat. So this is the actual live platform that I'm taking you through at the moment. You can go to ctc.africa or www.ctc.africa to access it. Very basically, when you land here, we've integrated with a whole number of different data sources. This is a work in progress, and then we're still busy cleaning up a lot of data, but I'm going to show you where we are today. One of the data sources we are integrating with directly is clinicaltrials.gov and also the PACTR Clinical Trials Registry to obtain a lot of information into and pull it into our platform in real time. Some of the other sections here that you would see on the platform, Tom alluded to it earlier. So we launched our MVP some time ago, really focused on COVID. But I think obviously today, the real focus is around regulatory aspects and IRBs. So I'm quickly going to show you for those. I did see earlier on the survey and the Mentimeter that there are a whole bunch of researchers actually on the call. So we encourage all of you, any clinical research professional that is playing some part in the whole process of clinical trials, to register a profile for themselves. So you click here on the top right-hand side on register. You will see that we made it very easy. You can either go username, name, surname, and create an account for you. Or you can also use LinkedIn to your credentials there, or Orchid ID. We are working on some others here to make the registration process very easy. I'm just going to log in here quickly with my LinkedIn account. So it will take you to the LinkedIn page. You enter your LinkedIn username and password, and from there, it will automatically create an account for you. So the information that we are obtaining from LinkedIn is your profile picture, your name, and your email address. And then you can go through a process slowly but surely here to build your profile. You can load all of your degrees in here, your research experience, and whatever else related to publications and presentations. You will be prompted to choose a specific persona. We have a couple of different personas or profile types, either a researcher or a regulatory officer or someone representing the regulatory community, or a sponsor or a CRO. And you can just choose those, and then later on there will be some specifics and that we're going to open up on those profiles that pertains to them. So on the left-hand side, I quickly want to show you, this is sort of where we're collecting and managing all of our data. And then I'm going to show you the front end of the platform where we're actually displaying this to the community. So on the left-hand side, some of the things we are profiling at the moment. So the first one is all the research centers and the research sites. So you can click on there once you've created your profile, and then on here you will be navigated to a page that looks like this. So here you will see that this would list all of your own sites. So if you're an administrator of a site, it will be listed here. You can then also affiliate yourself with specific sites. So I've affiliated myself with Kemri, just as an example. And here on the last tab, it will actually show you all the research sites that we have profiled so far. So we have just under 2,000 research sites that we have profiled so far. So you can search for your site here. And if you maybe are doing research at multiple sites, you can search for it. And here on the right-hand side, you'll see, first of all, you can go into the site itself. So if you click there, you will see all the details pertaining to that specific site. And if you want to associate yourself with that specific site, you can click on the little tick icon there, and that site, you will then be associated with that site, and then you will become an affiliate. And the same way, you can also, here on the right hand side, click on this little icon if you want to become a contributor or of that specific site, and then you can update the details. So in the same way that we are doing and keeping all this site data up to date, we are also profiling all the national regulators and all the research ethics committees on the continent. This is obviously a public platform. We are relying on a whole bunch of public resources to assist us in populating this. So a lot of, and almost all the data that you see here, we did receive from the public. We are enriching the data as we go along, and we're also cleaning the data. So from a national regulator perspective, once again, you will see my regulators, you will see affiliated regulators, and also other regulators. So at the moment, you'll see that we've profiled 36 countries so far from a national regulatory perspective. And then again, you'll see these little icons here that will assist you. So you can either associate yourself with a specific national regulator, or if there are some representatives on the call who are the main administrators of these national regulators, we really encourage you to come and look for your specific national regulator here and click on this little icon to become the administrator of that specific entity. Because you'll see here, for some of the entities, we have a lot of data, and then for some, we really have minimal data. In the national regulator, we are collecting some details around, obviously, the address, contact details. The team at AVAREF have assisted us, and they sent out a questionnaire to some regulatory officials. So we collected a whole bunch of information regarding the processes that these national regulators follow for the applications, and then also some of the approval timelines, and also some detail here around how much applications and amendments and reapprovals do cost. So I'm going to show you now how we use all of this information on the front end. So this is really the place where the administrators of these entities, either a national regulator or a research ethics committee, is really where they update the information, where they profile it, we ultimately then display all this information on the front end in an interactive way. You'll see here to date, we've profiled almost 150 research ethics committees, but I can guarantee you not all of them are here yet. And so I encourage you to, if you can't find your research ethics committee here, please add it. Or if you find your specific ethics committee here, please associate it yourself with it, or a request to become the administrator if you are representing that IRB. So in the next 6 weeks before we launch the final platform at the end of October, we are going to focus on the service providers, the sponsors, the CROs, and also the sponsors. So please log into the platform on a regular basis to see how we are releasing those features. So I'm now going to go to the public front end. So this is where we are profiling this information. So specifically on the, I'm going to show you two maps. You're more than welcome to navigate around here. I know we are more over time. So first of all, from a clinical research site perspective, we have two interactive maps. This is the first of our interactive maps. This is the map where we are profiling all the different research sites and also the clinical trials currently taking place on the continent. You will see, you would have seen earlier that we've profiled almost 2,000 clinical research centers, but on the map we're only displaying about 600 of them. So we are going through a process to, on a GPS location, map these sites one by one, and then also linking in real time all the clinical trials that we find on clinicaltrials.gov or on the PACTA registry. We are dynamically allocating them to these sites. On the left-hand side, we've integrated with some of our partners. This is disease burden data that we are receiving from IHME. So here on the left-hand side, if you want to see, this is statistics now that we got from 2017. So the prevalence of malaria in these specific countries, you can see what it was in 2017. You can filter it down into the gender and also the age of that specific patient or the person who contracted the disease. And then you can also filter here of specific studies that you want to see. If you want to see, you only want to see interventional or observational trials, you can do that. And then if you want to see people doing phases 1, 2, and 3 trials, you can say phase 2. And then as an example, you can maybe say, I want to only see sites that have a study that is at the moment doing work in malaria. And then you can click on malaria and you will see here that there are 2 sites here that are currently profiled for that. And if you click on a specific one here, it will take you to that specific site and you can see all the details related to that specific site. So this is just very high level, really focusing on the clinical research sites. You are more than welcome to play around on the platform to see what there is. And we are constantly cleaning up the data as we go and making more and more data available. So you will see that, I just want to quickly reset the search here. So you'll see that there are a whole bunch of specific sites and trials that have been mapped so far, and all of these little icons that you see here is interactive. So now I'm quickly going to show you the regulatory part of it. So here on the regulators and the ethics part, so I'm quickly going to jump to this. So the information that I showed you earlier, where all of these national regulators are profiled, this is, we've profiled them into an interactive map. So you're more than welcome then to click on any of these countries. So if you click on a specific country, it will show you all the data that we have collected so far based on that specific national regulator. And then also from an ethics committee side, it will show you all the ethics committees that are linked to that specific country. You can then expand on the ethics committee or the IRB and you can see all the information. With a lot of them, we do have complete detail or a lot of detail, but there is some missing that detail here and there. So we please encourage you to reach out to your ethics committees and really ask them to register their profiles so that they can update all the details that you see here. Because ultimately, if we have more detailed data and current data on the platform, we will attract more funding to the African continent when it comes to clinical research. The last quick thing that I want to show you, sorry, Colin, I'm totally over time, is we've built a regulator, like a comparison tool. I know some of the speakers alluded to this. So this is the central button that you see here. So if you click on that, you can compare different national regulators with each other. So if, as an example, you say you want to compare Uganda, sorry, I made a typo there. So if I say Uganda and I want to say SAPRA here in South Africa, and maybe I want to compare Kenya as an example, you can choose those three national regulators and you can click on compare regulators, and it will actually throw it out in a column-based format like this. And then you can see the types of information that we've collected so far. And based on this, you can make a decision. So on some of these countries, we do have some information around their approval timelines, the fees that you have to pay, and we are enriching this data on an ongoing basis. So one of the data sources that we are working with currently is ClinRegs, that we have partnered there with the NIH, and we are also relying on some partners who are contributing their data, who are doing clinical research on the African continent. So this data will be enriched by us on an ongoing basis, but once again, if you are representing any of these national regulators or any of the IRBs, and you are on this call or you know any of them, please encourage them to register a profile so that they can come and complete their specific regulatory agency's profile here on the platform. Thanks, Colin. Sorry, I did it as quick as I could.
Adrian, you did really well. I mean, you went rapid fire, but I think you gave the colleagues a good overview of where we are. So thank you very much. So we are over time, but we still have 9 minutes of normal time available. I'm going to ask your indulgence that maybe we might keep you for another 5, maximum 10 minutes, but I'm hoping that I can get Jen to at least be there right at the end. Jen's the overall lead for this project, and I'd like her to be able to help us with giving some next steps. But for now, there's been some questions that have come through the chat line. There's also been a few questions that came in via email. I'm going to try and get at least one question to each of the panelists. My apologies in advance if I'm not able to get something to you. Let me start with Bisola. During the course of your presentation, you had indicated that a delay in one site can delay the entire program. Can you give us some insights into why that would be the case?
It's database lock, right? So if you have a protocol amendment in the midst of, let's say, a phase 3 program, and you need all sites to approve that change in order to implement it to lock the database. And if you get it from 99% of sites, but there's one site pending, you cannot lock your database until you get that approval, which puts then the submission and registration timeline at risk. And we do have to look at this holistically in the sense that, it then delays, perhaps it's a treatment for an unmet medical need that delays, we sometimes quantify that delay and what it means to the patient getting the products registered and available worldwide. So I think that's the implication I talk about in a broader scope.
That's great, Bisola. I mean, one goal with the platform is also to be able to educate and to give our community insights into the entire clinical trial process. That's a feature that we will show at some stage in the future in terms of some of the training opportunities. But thanks, Bisola, for your answer. So there's one question that I have here that's comes in, and George, this is for you. What can sites do to make your life easier as a CRO as it applies to site feasibility assessments?
Thanks, Colin. I think from a site's perspective, there are a couple of things that would really be helpful. One is just a general capability statement about, laboratories, catchment area, types of patients, and some really epidemiologic data in the communities they serve would actually be very helpful, because you know, as Bisola said, you know, we do get used to certain sites. We understand that site, so we keep on going there. And we go there, we start off with malaria, then we might go for pneumonia, and so on and so forth. So understanding the general epidemiology, what cases they see, is really helpful. But also, most importantly, and we're learning this as we go, as new treatments are approved within countries and so on, for some of the very specific diseases that they treat, let's say malaria, let's say, you know, vaccination schedules in those specific countries, what vaccines are approved for giving, as well as just standard of care treatment around specific diseases, malaria being one of them, would really be helpful, as that, you know, when you're doing a trial, especially when you're getting into phase 3, you're comparing, you know, standard of care versus what the new proposal is, the investigational product. So it's good to know what's normal use in those countries as well. But, you know, as much information as you can populate, especially on the CTC platform, would really get us started. At least it gets us curious to be able to start the conversation. So, you know, but also really the first thing is a very good contact information of the person we can talk to at the site would really be helpful. Thanks.
George. Thanks for emphasizing that, and that's been coming through quite a bit. I have one here for Jadi, and Jadi, I hope you can take this. So the question is about submission fees. So regulatory agencies have submission fees, and there's a suggestion that this might be a disincentive in the sense that this might be a motivation for additional reviews after AVAREF approvals. Can you comment on what is the role of AVAREF on the approval process relative to the individual agencies? Jadi? You're still muted.
Sorry. Yes, no, thank you very much for this excellent question. So I think, yes, there is a need to clarify what is the role of AVAREF in the review process. So AVAREF is not a regulatory body, so it's a network of regulatory agencies and ethics committees. So which means that it should facilitate, you know, the work of regulators, it should strengthen them, it should facilitate harmonization, and let's say convergence of procedures. So that's what AVAREF is doing. So the review AVAREF doesn't replace the review by individual countries, but AVAREF role is to bring together all the involved countries in a specific, for example, in a specific clinical trial, and then they can have common requirement for the submission, so which will prevent to have duplication or even maybe conflicting demands regarding the application process, and also to align on the timelines in how long time they are able to do the review. So every country will bring its review years, and then together they will improve the quality of the review, they will do the work in a timely manner. So that's the benefit of AVAREF. But in advance of the joint review, so every country will look at the document, at the protocols and other appendices, and then they will raise queries, which will come to the common platform AVAREF is providing. There is an electronic platform. So, and then the sponsor will have a unique platform where they can address all the queries coming from all countries. And then countries will together try to align on the decision, to have a common report on the outcome of the review. So that's what AVAREF does. So it facilitates the review, but the ultimate decision is done by countries. Even the review is done by countries. But if countries, for example, they need to have a technical support, so AVAREF can also bring on board external experts to support the mechanism. It can be also even other regulatory authorities. It can be, you know, for example, EMA, if it is a product which goes under the Article 58 of the European Medicine Agency. So that's the role of AVAREF. So it's not a regulatory agency itself, but it is, it's a platform. It's a mechanism to facilitate the work, to have a collaborative work together, to streamline the decision making, and also to have a better interaction with the sponsor. So that's, I don't know if it clarifies. So regarding the fees, so it means that the fees still need to be paid at the individual countries level. The fees need to be paid. But maybe one thing which can be the feature for AVAREF is to see if there is a way, maybe to let's say to have a fee mechanism at the AVAREF secretariat level, because currently AVAREF is providing, this joint review procedure without any payment to be done to AVAREF. So it is free of charge. But in the future, maybe this may change, and we can have countries paying to the secretariat. Thank you very much.
Jyoti, thank you so much. Thank you for re-emphasizing the sovereignty of the country's regulatory agencies. I think that was an important point to come across. So I'm going to go one question each, one to Adrian, and then to David, and then I'm going to hand over to Jen. And Jen, I wonder if you could get ready to answer 2 points in your closing remarks. One is around how the platform can be used for trainings, and the second one is around networking clinical trial experts. So Jen, if you could get ready with that. David, the question for you, and if you could give us a quick answer if it's possible, given the amazing work you guys do. Can you give one specific example as to what the foundation does when it comes to strengthening regulatory systems?
That's a very broad question, but I'll try to limit my answer given the time. So one of the elements, whether it is in the clinical development space with AVAREF or in the marketing authorization registration side of things, the first thing is to harmonize technical requirements. Because if different regulators and different ethicists are using different standards, that becomes a challenge. So that has been a large part of our effort, working with partners, is to harmonize standards and bring those standards to the international level, whether it's WHO or ICH standards. So that's one big piece. The second one is in capacity building, and a big part of the work that the initiatives undertake is training regulators, training ethicists, etc., and working through WHO to strengthen the maturity. It's a whole big element of regulatory system strengthening around building the maturity level of regulators. It's not much that we have done on the ethics side on that issue, but something in scope. And then the work sharing, as Diadia described, the joint reviews, and on the marketing authorization side, joint assessments of marketing authorization applications. Thank you very much.
David, thank you. I mean, I think that gives this audience a good sense of what you do. Adrian, I'm going to ask you one big question, and hopefully you can give us a short answer as well. How do you keep the data on the platform up to date?
Yes, thanks, Colin. Good question. So currently we do integrate directly into the clinical trials registries that I mentioned earlier, so into clinicaltrials.gov and into Pacter. On a real-time or a weekly basis, as trials are loaded there, we do populate them on the platform. Yes, to keep site data, national regulators data, IRBs data up to date, we are really going to rely on the public there to assist us to profile themselves. And we do have a team here on our side with the African Academy of Sciences there based in Nairobi, who are constantly engaging with different resources to update the data from our side. So it's sort of a whole community kind of approach.
Thanks, Adrian. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Jen. Jen, if you could mop up any other questions, colleagues, friends, thank you so much for joining us. And I'll leave Jen to both do the closing remarks and close the meeting. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks very much, Colin, and thanks everyone who has been online and continues to be with us. So I'll take the questions quickly. So the questions were on training and networking for clinical trial experts. So the CTC platform, one of the things that it's already providing is the capabilities of experts on the continent to register themselves, profile themselves, and the features will be available for them to be able to network amongst themselves and even with the regulators and the ethicists. So this is already a feature that is existing on the platform. So I would encourage people to profile themselves and start networking. With regard to the second question in terms of training, this is on our to-do list. So as you've heard, this has been work that has been ongoing for the last almost 3 years. Now that we are almost finishing up with the priority features, which is what we've been talking about today. Training is one of the things that we want to be able to provide on the platform, and we will start working on that in the next couple of months. So please keep checking back, and soon we will have different models on the platform, and we are working with different stakeholders so that we can determine and make sure that we have a variety of different models targeting different aspects of the clinical trial pipeline. And with that, and because I know we are running out of time, I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to just emphasize that this is an ongoing process. Your feedback would be highly appreciated. Please email us or call us or send contact our help desk so that we can better understand what your needs are and if we are answering those needs and if there are changes that we could make to the platform to make it serve your needs better. The main platform will be launched in October, but again, that does not mean we cannot improve on it. So even after October, we will still hopefully continue making changes to the platform going forward. So your feedback again will be highly appreciated. I want to take time to thank the panelists that have graced this occasion, a very informative webinar. So thank you very much for taking your time to make this happen. I want to thank the Gates Foundation, who are our partners and our funders for this particular program. I know that Pam, who is the Senior Program Officer for the Foundation, is on the call. Thank you very much for your support. And I will also want to thank the Academy and everyone else that has participated in this webinar. And I want to, with that, I think that's all I have to say, and back to Colin to close the meeting.
So Jane, I really wanted you to do it because...
That's fine. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, we'll be very happy to hear from you in whichever way that you can reach out to us. Thank you.